When our second son was a toddler, he developed an uncanny interest in the presidents of the United States. It started out with a set of flashcards and a book about the presidents, and it quickly developed into a full-on obsession. The presidents were all he wanted to talk about or play with. By his third birthday, he was able to look at photos of the 43 presidents and identify them by name. He spent the next year using most of his playtime lining up his presidential flashcards and figurines, pretending to talk in a microphone like a president, acting out writing the Declaration of Independence like Thomas Jefferson, and pretending he was Abraham Lincoln, freeing the slaves. To say the least, our son completely idolized these men. At the time, we thought it was hilarious, adorable, and sweet. Fast forward to present day. Just last week, my kids brought out the President's Floor puzzle, and it brought back all sorts of memories. The puzzle features all of the presidents up to Barack Obama. And for an instant while watching them, I imagined adding our current president to the picture. I instantly got a giant pit in my stomach, imagining my children using Donald Trump as their role model, or idolizing him, or thinking it's acceptable to act like him in any way. Now, I absolutely understand that the previous 43 presidents of the US were not perfect men. They all have some human blemishes on their records, some more than others. But Donald Trump takes immorality to a whole new level. He has pushed decency, integrity, and kindness to the side in favor of hatred, bullying, and egotism. To be honest, we would never be making this series of videos if that wasn't the case. In my opinion, the President of the United States needs to be an example, not just to our children, but to our grown-ups, of what is acceptable human behavior. I'm going to leave it to Ben to give you the specific details in today's episode, Trump's moral character.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to The Ramble, a series of videos about the upcoming election and why it makes moral and economic sense to vote for Joe Biden. You know, I've heard a lot of people say something to the effect of, I don't really like Trump's personal character or his morals, but I like his policies. In past videos, we've focused mostly on policy, and we've talked about why we think Donald Trump's policies are actually not good for the United States and why Joe Biden's in many instances would be better. In this video, I want to talk explicitly and exclusively about Donald Trump's morals, and talk about, why I think his morals themselves are harmful for our country. Does a president's character really matter? This statement of I don't really like his character, but I like his policies kind of insinuates that maybe the president's character doesn't matter very much. And I want to talk about why I don't think that that's true. So the first reason why I think a president's character really matters is because what a president does also affects what other people do. So let's review a little bit what President Trump does. He famously tweets all of the time. And he has a long history of pretty racist and xenophobic and bullying tweets. I'll name just a couple of examples, but the record is really, really long. He, for example, called the Muslim mayor of London a stone cold loser. In his speech when he announced his candidacy for president, he insinuated that immigrants are largely drug dealers and rapists, and he's doubled down on that in recent years as well. And as I discussed in a previous video, that's simply not true. Maybe one of the very worst ones, this was July 14th, 2019, he put out a tweet that insinuated that 4 congresswomen of color in the United States were not from the US when they are American citizens. What he said was, why don't they go back and fix the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came? That is, in my opinion, an overtly racist tweet. And actually, in the follow-up, a reporter asked him, does it concern you that many people find that tweet racist? Trump responded, it doesn't concern me because many people agree with me. That I think is pretty terrible. But maybe it's possible that a president says terrible things and it doesn't really matter that much. I actually have a friend at Princeton who just barely put out a new paper that was published that actually shows the effect of what people hear on their eventual actions. So what do they show? It's actually a really interesting study, and it proves exactly this point that what President Trump is doing is going to have an impact on other people. So what do? They look at Facebook posts by a far right group in Germany that is explicitly anti-immigration and anti-refugee. And they show that the more this group posts on Facebook, the more hate crimes there are against refugees in Germany. And to really kind of nail this down, they also show that in cities where there are power outages or Facebook outages, you don't see an increase in hate crimes when this group posts. So it's only in areas where people can actually see the post that you see the increase in hate crimes. And I think this does a pretty incredibly good job of showing that social media posts that are racist or xenophobic actually do result in more hate crimes. They actually have a follow-up paper that looks exclusively at Donald Trump and shows that when he puts up anti-Muslim tweets, there are more hate crimes against Muslims in the following days, and especially in counties where there are more Twitter followers of Donald Trump. So what do I, these are like academic studies. I think it's kind of appalling actually that we can write a whole academic paper just on Donald Trump's xenophobic tweets, that there is a big enough sample size to even do that. But the evidence shows really clearly that what a president says has a direct impact on violence against disadvantaged people. And this is why we just simply can't stand for having a president who is explicitly and overtly racist and xenophobic. Now, those are academic studies. There's another concrete example that I think is worth pointing out. In 2017, there was a rally in Charlottesville for the alt-right movement. It was called the Unite the Right movement. It was organized by a group of white nationalists, large participation from neo-Nazi groups as well. And one of the organizers of that group, Richard Spencer, he said this. He said, "There's no question that Charlottesville wouldn't have occurred without Trump. It really was because of his campaign and this new potential for a nationalist candidate who was resonating with the public in a very intense way." Now, tragically, at that rally, there was a group of people who were protesting the alt-right movement, and one of the white nationalists who was there drove his car into that group and killed Heather Heyer. And I lay some of the blame to that at Donald Trump's feet for being a candidate who promotes division, who promotes white nationalism. Now, I want to say Trump himself is kind of a master at just saying enough to get across his bullying and prejudicial message while still having plausible deniability and sort of claiming, oh, I didn't mean it in that way or whatever. He's very, very good at that. I would say don't fall for it. I think anyone can make a one-off comment that comes out wrong, that maybe sounds racist on accident. But the pattern is just way too strong for Donald Trump of consistently being derogatory, and especially towards groups that are disadvantaged. And so I don't think you can let him off the hook because they're not one-off comments. Now, the second reason why I think a president's character and morals matter is because they have a direct effect on other people as well. So previously I was talking about an indirect effect of what Trump says then causes other people to say and do and believe things. Importantly, the president himself has a lot of power. And I think it goes without saying that you don't want a bully or someone who's going to abuse that power to be in a position of power. And Trump's track record of the last 4 years, and even before when he was president, really demonstrates that he is very willing to abuse his power to help himself out and to put down other people. And let me just give several examples here. The most obvious example of this was Trump using his presidential power to limit military aid to Ukraine to try to convince them to launch an investigation into Joe Biden, his political opponent. Trump was impeached for this, but the Senate was unwilling to indict him and remove him from office. But for me, this act alone disqualifies him from being fit to be the president. It's just not okay to use presidential power for personal gain. I think we've seen this recently as well. Trump has consistently downplayed coronavirus. He's refused to wear a mask, and I think he's done this because he believes it will help him in the upcoming election. And I just have to personally wonder how many lives have been lost because Trump is unwilling to promote safe practices and, what science shows will limit the spread of the virus. But it's not only his actions as president. that point toward him using his power to abuse other people and to get and for his own personal gain. One really terrible example, in April 2005, in an interview with Howard Stern, Trump openly admitted that he used his power as the owner of the Miss America pageant to walk into the dressing room while the women were getting dressed, and that no one could stop him because of this. And of course, there's the famous Access Hollywood tapes that came out as well just before the previous election, where he openly bragged about sexually assaulting women. This is just simply not okay, and it's not something that we can tolerate in the President of the United States. In addition, Trump famously insults people all the time. Maybe you say those insults are just petty. I personally would never let my kids talk the way that Donald Trump talks. But more concerning is his insults show a fundamental pattern of putting down people who are already disadvantaged. In particular, Trump insults women, calling them horseface or fat or ugly. He insults the poor. He's called people who are poor morons because they're poor. He's insulted Jews, calling them brutal killers and not nice people at all. And he has a really long history of insulting Muslims. And in fact, he falsely claimed that Muslims were celebrating on 9/11. He instituted the travel ban for Muslim countries. And this overall pattern is, again, something that I personally can't tolerate in a president, of putting down other people who are already disadvantaged in our society. Finally, Trump has also tried to use his power to override Congress. So in 2019, Trump declared a national emergency so that he could get funding to build the border wall along our southern border. This was explicitly against what Congress had allowed. Congress had over and over voted against funding the border wall. And importantly, control over the budget is the strongest check and balance that Congress has against executive power. And Trump is the only president who's tried to use an executive order of declaring a national emergency to override that power. And I really just can't let the refugee issue go. I know I mentioned refugees in our video about immigration, but I just have to highlight again that Trump has reduced the number of refugees allowed into our country by 71%. And this just goes so fundamentally against my Christian beliefs of trying to take in strangers and help the poor and the people who are in desperate need of help. And Trump is sort of completely unwilling to use his power to benefit people other than himself. When I was doing research for the video that we just put out on abortion, I came across this great line that I think really kind of underlines who President Trump is. And the line was, that President Trump is not pro-life, he's pro-Mr. Trump. And I think that's true not just in the case of abortion. He is not creating a culture of life, a culture of unity. And this is why we just simply can't have him continue as president of the United States. So let me just wrap up. The main points that I'm trying to make here are, first of all, that President Trump has a history of abusing his own power to benefit himself and to the detriment of other people, especially those who are disadvantaged. And maybe even more importantly, what President Trump does and says has indirect effects by influencing what other people believe and what other people are willing to do. And this is something we just can't stand for. Overall, my beliefs on this and my thoughts on what I hope our president is going to promote are summarized in a quote that was actually given just in our very recent General Conference of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This is a quote from President Howard W. Hunter. He said, "The world in which we live would benefit greatly if men and women everywhere would exercise the pure love of Christ, which is kind, meek, and lowly. It is without envy or pride. It seeks nothing in return. It has no place for bigotry, hatred, or violence. It encourages diverse people to live together in Christian love regardless of religious belief, race, nationality, financial standing, education, or culture." That's what I believe. And I believe we need a president who promotes those values.